Today we are going to be talking about poverty. Most of the kids we work with at Anchor House have grown up in poverty, so we believe it is important as staff working with these children to understand the culture and belief systems that come along with growing up in generational poverty. This training is adapted from A Framework for Understanding Poverty by Ruby Payne, and the slideshow information is inspired by Fortress Youth Development Center. If you are interested in learning more about the mindset of poverty, I would highly recommend Ruby Payne's book. Today we're going to be talking about the definition of poverty, the hidden rules of the classes, characteristics of generational poverty, and creating relationships with youth in poverty. So first we're going to talk about the definition of poverty, which is the extent to which an individual does without resources. We're going to talk about those resources in just a minute. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are two different types of poverty. We are talking about generational poverty today, but I think it's important to understand the difference between the two. Generational poverty is defined as having been in poverty for at least 2 generations. The majority of kids we work with were born to parents who lived in poverty and are kids growing up in a culture of poverty, which is a cycle that perpetuates. So when we talk about the culture of poverty, we are talking about generational poverty. Situational poverty is defined as a lack of resources due to a particular event, like someone losing their job, a death in the family, or a divorce. These are the 9 resources that we talk about when we talk about not having the resources you need. The first one is financial. While this might be the most obvious, it's oftentimes the least significant, which we'll talk about later. The second is emotional, being able to control your emotional responses, especially to negative events. The third aspect is mental, having the mental ability and acquired skills to be able to deal with daily life. This could also be referred to as academic. Next is spiritual, believing in divine purposes and guidance. Physical, having physical health and mobility. Support systems, having friends, family, and backup in times of need. Relationships and role models, having frequent access to adults who are appropriate and nurturing and who do not engage in self-destructive behavior. And lastly is knowledge of hidden rules, which we'll talk about in just a second. So what I want you guys to think about is, which of these resources do we at Anchor House provide? As staff, how do you provide these kids with access to resources that they might not have otherwise? Next, we want to look at the differences between the 3 classes: poverty, entertainment, and wealth. It is important to acknowledge what your perspective is when dealing with youth in poverty, whether that's poverty as well, middle class, or wealth. It'll help you better relate to your kids when you can recognize your perspective and then recognize theirs as well. Society operates by middle class hidden rules, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The assumption for each class is that everyone they interact with is familiar with their hidden rules and their driving forces, the thing that drives the decisions that they make. The bottom line, or driving force, is important to note for each class. So, in poverty, decisions are made based on who they're going to affect, the entertainment value, and relationships that they have. Relationships are really the driving force behind everything for individuals in poverty. In middle class, decisions are made based on the ramifications those are going to have for work and achievement. From a middle class perspective, the decisions I make to go to school, to get a career, and the friends I make are based on how they're going to affect my work and achievement. And in wealth, decisions are made based on the financial, social, and political ramifications. And something to think about. Have you seen entertainment and relationships be a driving force in the youth you work with? So we're going to talk about the hidden rules among the classes and how they differ. What I want you to think about as we go is how have you seen these played out with the youth you work with, or in your own life? We are not going to cover all the rules listed, but I wanted to put them on here so you could take a look at some of the other hidden rules. The first hidden rule we're going to talk about is possessions. Individuals in poverty value the people around them the most. That means they will fight for those people and stick up for those people. In middle class, those tend to be more things. In wealth, they are more one-of-a-kind of objects, legacies, pedigrees, those kind of things. Personality. For individuals in poverty, it's based on entertainment. A sense of humor is highly valued. You may have seen this in your kids who may choose inappropriate time to crack jokes or try to be funny. In the middle class, personality is used to perform well and get ahead. A wealthy personality is for connections. Food. This is one of the most tangible ways we can see the differences. In poverty, your mom might ask, "Did you have enough?" In middle class, your mom might ask, "Did you like it?" And in wealthy class, she may ask, "Was it presented well?" You really see this played out going out to eat. In regards to time, individuals in poverty believe that the present is the most important. It is about surviving in the moment. We see this in our kids when they make a decision to fight or not do well in school. It is not based on the future, but how they feel at that exact moment. In middle class, the values are based on the future. I am going to do well in school right now so I can go to college in the future and get a good job. They may choose not to fight so it won't hurt their job opportunities later on. In wealth, traditions and history are the most important. Education in poverty is valued. It is not viewed as worthless, but they don't always see it as a reality. It is not always viewed as attainable for them. In the middle class, education is crucial for climbing the ladder of success and making money. And in wealth, education is a necessity for maintaining their status and keeping tradition. In poverty, worldview is seen in terms of the local setting. In poverty, what is immediately surrounding you is your entire world. There is not a lot of thought about what is going on outside of your neighborhood. In middle class, people see the world in terms of the national setting, politically, socially, and economically. And in wealth, you see in an international view. Finally, the driving forces in poverty are going to be for survival, entertainment, and for relationships. All decisions are based on those three things. Is it going to help me get by? Is it going to entertain me? And is it going to hurt or help my relationships? The driving force for middle class are based on how it's going to affect your work and achievement. And in wealth, they're based on social and political connections. So what does this mean? Assumptions made about an individual's intelligence and approaches to school and work settings may relate to their hidden rules. So our kids' performance in school, whether that is poor or good, might be related to the hidden rules that they understand. Kids that are exposed to middle class hidden rules are going to perform better. Students have to be taught the hidden rules of the middle class, not because they are better, but because in order to succeed, you have to know the rules of the middle class. Many of the attitudes that students and parents bring with them are an integral part of their culture and belief systems. Middle class solutions shouldn't always be pushed onto them when there are other workable solutions. We never want our kids to feel like they're lesser because of their culture. There are a lot of good things that come out of poverty culture, and we don't want to degrade that. And understanding the culture and values of poverty may lessen anger and frustration you may feel when dealing with youth in poverty. Have you ever felt frustrated that the youth you work with can't reach a goal that they set or don't value education? Maybe this will help if you can understand where they're coming from. Finally, many students don't believe they're in poverty, even if they are on welfare. Just like many wealthy people don't believe they're wealthy. They might say, "So-and-so has more than I do." So we never want to refer to our kids when we are talking to them as being in poverty, which this might sound obvious, but it should be stated. We're going to talk about the characteristics of generational poverty. And just like any time you're talking about generalizations, we want to recognize that not all people fall into the generalization. Some of you will see these characteristics in the youth you work with, and some will not. You may see some of the characteristics and others not at all. We believe it's important to understand generally the culture and belief systems that our kids are coming from. Because even if it does not apply to one particular youth, it does generally apply to the community that we work with. The first characteristic I want to talk about is that society owes one a living. When I say this, I don't want you to immediately assume that all people that come from poverty are lazy, because we see that generalization broken time and time again by hardworking parents and hardworking children. But what it does mean is that the families and youth that we work with are often comfortable accepting charity. They may ask for items or to go places. Second is background noise. If you've walked into the homes where many of these youth grew up, you would find a TV blaring, 5 people talking at once, someone playing music off their phone. These kids are more comfortable with noise going on. And then, of course, like we've talked about, the importance of personality and entertainment. The bigger the personality, the higher they are up socially. Most of the youth come from a matriarchal family. Mom is going to be the most important in the house. And a lot of our kids are operating in this survival orientation, meaning they're going to do whatever they need to do to make it to the next day. This may mean literally surviving or maintaining where they are socially in society. Most of our youth are going to live in the moment and make decisions based on how they feel at that moment in time. And then nonverbal communication is very important. Our kids are going to communicate by eye rolls, shrugging, or puffing their chest. And you can read a lot into how these kids feel, not by what they're saying, but by their body language. We talked about the importance of people, how people are the most important possession to individuals in poverty. Our kids often have a negative orientation. They don't operate a lot out of optimism, but out of realism that things are just bad and they're going to have to live with that. One of the things that helped me understand youth in poverty the most is that discipline that happens in the home is not often meant to change behavior. So when the kids are disciplined by their parents, it's not meant to fix or change the behavior. Instead, it's done for penance and forgiveness. So you did the crime, you get the punishment. I forgive you, and then the recycle repeats. Rather than, you did the crime, we're going to rehabilitate it, and then finally, something that you've seen quite a lot is a lack of order and organization. Some of that is because they're teens, but it's also a characteristic of how they were raised. Next, we're going to talk about how this applies specifically to youth. The first is that if our kids get angry, they will quit. If they don't like who they're working for, they will quit. They are focused on their current feelings and aren't able to think in the long term. The good news is, though, that if they do like you, they will work hard. This means that you have the opportunity to build a relationship with our boys and get them to do something that they wouldn't normally want to do. An example of this may be goal setting or completing homework. Our youth do not use positive conflict resolution skills. They prefer to settle issues in verbal or physical assaults. These are skills that they need to be taught directly. Don't assume that they know how to solve a conflict in a peaceful way. We may tell them not to punch or curse their peers out, but if we don't offer another successful alternative, we can't expect them to follow our advice. Our youth do not have access to formal language skills, which will be an issue for them when they need to do job interviews. So, as much as you can, demonstrate formal language and teach them formal language. Explain that formal language is the language of money. It will be what helps them get a job. Our kids, surprise, surprise, are not emotionally reserved when angry. They will say exactly what is on their mind. This is a good time to remember that this is not a reflection on you, but rather that they do not have the same filter that you may have. Again, don't assume that they know how to react any other way. If you have a relationship with the youth, when they're calm, take time to offer them alternatives, such as stepping away from the scenario or taking a deep breath. Our youth are also very independent. They don't take kindly to the parent voice. This is the voice that says, well, this is how you should do it. You should do this because I said so, or I know better. Any sort of judgmental statement like that, they're not going to want to accept. They prefer the adult voice, which is talking to them on an adult level. They also need emotional warmth to feel comfortable. They need that from you in order to be able to relate to you. As you know, our youth are often very unorganized. They will always have a lot of information as to why something is missing. You'll notice that room keys will go missing or homework assignments. Our youth are also physically aggressive. They can't seem to get started on assignments and projects. This is because they do not have self-talk skills. This is the ability to talk yourself through a problem and the steps needed to finish a project. We need to directly teach them these skills and demonstrate using these skills. A way you can do this is by thinking aloud. Demonstrate to the youth how you handle a problem, not by telling them directly, but by modeling problem-solving skills out loud. Oftentimes, they lack the ability to monitor their own behavior and laugh when they're disciplined. This is a way of saving face and keeping their social standing. They often have a dislike and distrust of authority and talk back. They do not do well with lecture. They need to be engaged and respond in order to learn. There are some ways that you can specifically build relationships with youth in poverty. We're going to talk in terms of deposits and withdrawals. Deposits are ways you can build the relationship, and withdrawals are ways you can actually harm the relationship. The first deposit is having an appreciation for humor and entertainment. Laugh at their jokes. Tell them that they're funny. A withdrawal would be putting them down or being sarcastic about their humor or even about them. The next one is accepting what they can't say about a person or situation. Because relationships and people are the most important to individuals in poverty, a high emphasis is put on respecting the confidentiality of people. They might not want to open up about what's going on at home or with their friends because they respect their need for privacy. A deposit would be accepting this, and a withdrawal would be insisting that they rat someone out. Another deposit would be assisting with goal setting. A withdrawal would be telling them their goals and not allowing them to express what they think is important. A deposit would be using the adult voice. An example of this would be, "These are the consequences of this action," instead of, "Well, if you do that, you'll be in trouble." Help them identify their options. Say, "I would recommend you do this," rather than, "You have to do this." It is a subtle difference, but it will really help with building relationships. Help them identify their options and resources, rather than making judgments about them. If a youth is up against something or having a situation, rather than telling them what to do, help them identify options on their own. Finally, understand the importance of their personality. Rather than being judgmental and pointing out negatives in their character, point out their strengths. Be positive and recognize the value in their personality. I would think this would be obvious, but it's something that we wanted to bring up. What I want you to take away from this training is not that kids in poverty have problems or are lesser, but where they're coming from. Awareness, not condemnation, about a child's situation, culture, and belief system is what will help our youth to succeed. The last issue I want to cover does not have to do with poverty, but with culture. When working with youth from different cultures, it's important that we do not place stereotypes on them. Recognize each individual for their own strengths, instead of placing judgments on them. In our home, we should encourage the youth to express their culture, whether that's through clothing, their choice of decor, food, or celebrating holidays. Be willing to research a youth's culture. It's also important to understand the social culture of a child, recognize their background and experiences, and that they'll shape how they handle emotions and react to authority. These are just some examples of how our staff can be culturally aware. Well, that's it. Don't forget to take your quiz.